is there benefit, let's say a marathon runner?
Yeah.
Is there benefit of going through your training period with saturated creatine stores and supplementing all the way up to the event?
Yeah, so the papers have used creatine for endurance events, have looked at a low dose. It's like, so, you might typically do 25 to 30 grams a day for 5 days and then hit 5 grams a day for a 3-week period. Whereas in an endurance event, you don't necessarily need that loading phase. You could just have the 5 grams a day over a 4 to 6 week period. And the idea then would be, if you're a responder over that longer period of time, you should be able to just slightly increase that energy system. So during my PhD, we used this in rodents to manipulate the pancreas. So the system by which your pancreas responds to glucose to pump out insulin is all dependent upon ATP flux through glycolysis. So the pancreas senses glucose, burns it through glycolysis, makes ATP. The ATP shuts down a cell membrane that allows the release of insulin, and away you go. Now, so what we did was we primed a whole heap of rodents with creatine. So absolutely no effect in the muscle because they were already at their highest load. But when we looked at the pancreas, these guys were pumping out 2 to 3 times the amount of insulin for the same amount of glucose that they were eating.
Wow. This is so interesting. From like a personal, selfish perspective, I've got an interesting anecdote with creatine use in myself.
Right.
And maybe you have a biochemical answer for this.
Go for it.
But so when I started creatine for the first time ever, which was quite recently, maybe a year ago, my insulin sensitivity improved, my glucose tolerance improved. I was trending low way more often.
Yep.
And I had to reduce my basal insulin.
Yeah, right.
I had to reduce my insulin to carb ratio at meals.
Yeah.
And then I cycled off it and it sort of worsened a little bit.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm one person, so it's not the best experiment, but I've got a friend who's type 1 diabetic as well, who lives in America, Cyrus. And I said, have you ever tried creatine? Let me know how you go. He calls me a few months ago and he goes, mate, I started taking creatine and it's had the same effect. He's going low frequently. He had to reduce his insulin dose. Where this really sort of tricks me is we don't produce insulin. So what you're talking about is that endogenous production of insulin, right? Yeah. I don't produce insulin. So what effect, how is that creatine impacting my glucose levels or insulin sensitivity if my pancreas isn't even producing any?
So, all right, so I was doing my PhD 1999 to 2003 and there was a paper that had come out in, I think it was 1991, and I'm going to unfortunately politically possibly get this wrong. I think it was out of Croatia. And it's the only paper, I mean, it's been a while since I looked, but it was the only paper at that time that had given creatine to type 1 diabetes patients.
I haven't even seen this.
And showed an impact on their insulin levels. Because at that time we decided, once we saw the effect in rodents, we thought, oh, well, let's see if we can do this in some humans. And the humans who typically eat a low creatine diet are vegetarians. So we recruited vegetarians, loaded them up on creatine. We didn't see an effect on insulin, but we saw an effect on glucose. We published that paper.
Wow. What was the effect that you saw on glucose?
I'm trying to, I believe it was lower, but I can't remember because then we applied for funding for a few years but never got it on the basis. So our applications were, we got some spotted rodent data. There seems to be something in the human world that we don't quite understand, but if you gave us some money, we might be able to unpack a little bit more. We think creatine loading could impact insulin sensitivity and release in diabetes patients, both type 1, type 2.
It's fascinating.
We never got any funding for it, so that just got parked and is sitting by the wayside. But there could be 2 things that are happening to you here. There's either, so part of my feeling from the rodent data would be, we got data to suggest we can increase the amount of insulin you're releasing. But as you say, you shouldn't be technically producing insulin.
But I haven't checked my C-peptide for a while.
Well, this is the thing,
What if I've had that little bit of a nudge to my beta cells and I've got a little bit that's getting produced? Is that a possibility?
I'm going to say yes because I never cross out anything until I've got an absolute no, right? The alternative side of things as well, though, is creatine can influence cellular hydration status, right? So you can increase water of the muscle. And when you increase water in the muscle, you can increase glycogen storage capacity.
Right.
And so if you can now also increase your capacity to store glycogen, that's going to put a drag on your blood glucose, right?
Yes.
And so for all we know, it's nothing to do with producing more insulin, but at the periphery, you've just increased your capacity to absorb more carbs.
Right.
It's also going to make you look nice and full.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that same mechanism can be said about resistance training, increasing muscle size.
Yeah.
You have a better glycogen storage capacity. It's the same kind of thing that we're talking about. So maybe it's this additive effect of your resistance training, plus I'm vegetarian, vegan. So, vegans are often, would you call them hyper responders or just more ergogenic effects come from creatine?
Well, there's a lower baseline level of creatine to begin with. So there is a greater benefit if you're coming from a lower store.
Yes, because the benefit that you get from it's dependent upon the amount that you've increased, not an absolute
That
level.
actually brings up an interesting question that I have. What does this say about, so if we're saying that the body produces creatine, but an optimal level, say for performance or endurance training, is achieved through supplementation. I've heard some folks say that this is actually evidence that perhaps we should be eating about 1 kilogram of meat a day,
to get creatine.
or 2 pounds of meat would get you there. What do you think about that sort of concept?
Getting your creatine levels up with natural dietary sources, you need to eat a lot.
Yeah. And what's the calorie sort of trade-off there,
But also, I don't know if there's any guarantee that the creatine that you'd be eating in that food product is going to be what ends up within your muscle cell as such as well.
Well, I mean, most of the studies would be in supplements, right? So
yes.
So you'd have to lean on the science and go, well, we know that creatine affects muscle creatine by X amount because of these supplements that they took. But can you extrapolate that to beef? I'd say probably not.
But even then, the protocols for creatine supplement studies, the creatine transporter needs insulin around, and so to enhance its uptake. And so very quickly it was always, don't just take creatine. You've got to take creatine with carbohydrate.
Do it after your workout, and there's a window. And,
and the very first studies, you drank your creatine supplement in orange juice, right? So it's not just in water and the like. So, and then it became, well, have your creatine supplement with some sugar as well. And it was just to increase that. So I don't know, you'd want to make sure you had a fairly nice insulin spike from the proteins that are in that meat to also ensure that the creatine's getting in there, right?
There's probably 0% of your audience eating 2 pounds of meat. So
it's a controversial point that I've seen made in other communities, and I thought I may as well just throw it out here.
I'd quite like to see the debate for planetary health where somebody argues that we have to be eating meat for the purposes of creatine.
Right. Yeah, just to optimize performance.
Yeah.